Okay, good to see you. We're starting 45 seconds early, just because uh, we can.
Mm.
The other people joining. So let's try to set a motivation for our class. That's the main reason for saying these prayers. It's not just a ritual that uh, has no particular meaning. Um, so we'll go for refuge, take refuge, and generate bodhicitta. So here it says taking refuge. I I've asked Yangtze Rinpoche in the past what he preferred, taking refuge or going for refuge. And he said he preferred going for refuge because in Tibetan and in Sanskrit, it's both of the words are, when you take refuge or go for refuge, it's to go. I go for refuge. Uh, Kyapsu chi, and like in Sanskrit, I think in Pali it's saranam. What is it? Buddhanam gachami. It's a gachami is the word for go. Sangye churang soki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penchis sangye drupa shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, which includes contemplating and meditating. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la Gangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunye dagi drola sangye drupa. Okay, then we'll offer mandala offering. No, just below that mandala offering. I mean, just above that.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
There we go. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, the skies, Chuki Kala, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandala Kamdirya Tayami. Okay. So good to see you. We're going to do a little meditation as we usually do to begin with. Good to see many of you. Snehi's here after we've missed our sister for a couple of weeks. I guess everyone else has been here most of the time. So let's begin with a little meditation. Sit comfortably, relax your body and mind. Remember, you don't have to multitask with your mind. You can put it on one point. I noticed when I was with my trainer at the fitness center trying to get rehabilitated, and he said, "Oh, you're much different than the other people I train. You're concentrated on what you're doing. You know, if I tell you to do this, you're doing that. You're not looking around or your mind is wandering." So I thought that was maybe a byproduct of having trying to train in concentration. So place your attention on the respiration. Once your attention has noticed it, keep it in mindfulness. Hold it with mindfulness to the exclusion of everything else. sometimes you can get yourself more disciplined by trying to count the breaths internally. And when you notice that you're not alert as to whether you're breathing in or breathing out, or you've lost the number, you go back to one, like a strict school teacher. That can sometimes cause you to then be more careful. So with a modicum of quiet, calm, develop this way, now turn your attention to a more subtle object, your mental consciousness. Watching the content of your mind to be able to infer the clear light nature of the mind. It's like a vast sky that has no shape or color, vast space, let's say. Within which our mental phenomena arise, different objects of mind, thoughts, sometimes perceptions. Thoughts can be divided into memories, thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, future-oriented, planning, thoughts about the present. Beyond all of them, there's this fluid, space-like entity, the clear light nature of the mind, the conventional clear light nature of the mind, which is also called the developmental Buddha nature, because the fact that the mind offers no resistance to the coming and going of mental events and is not stained by them, even if you've been angry for a long time, it doesn't stain your mind irrevocably. It can all be removed. And we can reprogram our internal solid state drive, so to speak, our mind. Whereas the mind, solid state doesn't work very well because the mind, of course, is not material. Of the three kinds of impermanent phenomena, material, consciousness, and non-associated compositional factors, mind, consciousness, is not derived from matter. It doesn't follow the same rules as matter, material. See if you can generate some joy thinking of the consequences of having this mind, this kind of mind, which all beings have but don't necessarily recognize. We can develop good qualities that we've always admired by habituating our mind in them. We could develop renunciation, bodhicitta, wisdom of emptiness, patience, love, mercy, compassion. We can develop qualities like single-pointed concentration and wisdom. And we can get rid of our own ego oriented pursuits, especially those aimed for the happiness of this life alone. Bodhisattvas do pursue the happiness of this life to the extent that it can become a cooperative condition for their health and their ability to relate with others and so forth. They do accumulate wealth to be able to distribute it to others, to benefit sentient beings, to benefit the Dharma. The fact that we can recognize this Buddha potential, developmental Buddha nature, is due to the fact that we have a life of leisure and endowment. The Buddha calls in so many sutras an auspicious moment, like a short instant in an otherwise dark sky when a bolt of lightning comes and illuminates the horizon. You can see everything clearly for an instant, instant here being one lifetime. We can know, we can see what's right and wrong. And even though our impulses our habit energy from previous lives may predispose us to work for negative ends, what we see later as negative ends, just working for our own gratification, ignoring the welfare of others. As we see the disadvantages of that, both in a very worldly, practical sense that no one wants to be with us when we act that way, but from a deeper Dharma sense that we create the cause of our own future suffering and our inability to develop on the path by cultivating those negative states of mind, we can get rid of them by applying their antidotes, temporal and ultimate antidotes. We can become worthy of the title human being. We can go beyond that, and although that's a noble goal in itself, to find some happiness of this lifetime, to be calm and so forth, but from a Dharma sense, this life will end. Those realizations will not necessarily carry forward in the future, although some may. What is more important is to work to escape from cyclic existence completely. So we're no longer under the influence of karma and illusion, of karma and klesha. And the Buddha mentioned in his Mahayana Sutras more than once that his intelligent followers should not be content with his Hinayana teachings alone, the teachings that explain how to find escape from cyclic existence, how to find nirvana, but they should instead try to develop the Mahayana, the doorway to which is the development of bodhicitta, a very special mind that takes cognizance of the suffering of all living beings with a merciful mind, remembering their kindness in so many ways, our affinity to them, how they've raised us with kindness again and again in innumerable lives, as mothers, as parents, as friends, mentors. And to develop the wish to help them escape from cyclic existence and achieve their highest goal. To do that, we have to achieve that highest goal, the highest goal meaning enlightenment, samyak sambodhi, fully qualified, complete enlightenment. To do that, of course, we need these renunciation, bodhicitta, wisdom of emptiness. But the main causes, cooperative causes of achieving enlightenment are the accumulating the two collections of merit and wisdom, which were explained by the Buddha in his Mahayana Sutras, elucidated particularly by Nagarjuna in his treatises on wisdom, and elaborated by Chandrakirti in his commentary on the Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, the Madhyamaka, which we're studying peripherally through the commentary by Lama Tsong Khapa, the illumination of the intention, illumination of the intent, Gompa Rapsal. So think, I'm going to participate this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whatever time zone you're in, with the intention of achieving enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. In order to do that, I need to accumulate the two collections, which are explained in this course. So I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate, hopefully with as little distraction as possible, having calmed our mind previously. I'm going to participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So with that in mind, no need to worry about making a mistake in class or asking a foolish question or something saving face. The goal is to achieve enlightenment. So opening up one's heart like that makes one less prone to worry about pride or appearances and so forth. So then bringing your attention back to the present. Good to see you all. We have Venerable Shanka, Venerable Lotsan Punzok with us in his new robes. Hi, Snehi, good to see you. Hi, Anna, David. Good to see everyone. So, oh, and Karen's here also in the shadows. Let me see. So how are we doing? Don, any questions?
Not yet, but thank you, Venerable.
Okay, okay. Anyone have a question before we begin? How are we doing? Okay, so I'm not sure if Richard is ready. Oh, Richard, hi, Venerable. I'm a bit under the weather, I guess he's saying here. Let's see, what does he say? Okay, not participate. I was going to ask Richard a question. Okay. So let me ask, maybe not fair to ask Snehi. She hasn't been here the last couple of classes. So Nadine, what are we talking about right now in this section of the Gompa Rapsal?
Oh, Venerable George, we are talking about something very wonderful, the 8 uncommon points of the Prasangikas.
Yeah. So that's one of the topics here. This word uncommon, so is usually it's tunmong mayimpa, which can be tunmong means ordinary. So tunmong mayimpa means that which is not ordinary. So uncommon, not the common, or sometimes translated as unique. Do you agree with that translation, Paul? Does that sound legitimate?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. That's okay. So I wanted to read a section from Don Lopez's book on tenets, where he translated the book on tenets by Chandrakirti Dorje. That this text that he wrote, that he translated, I think the Dalai, he says the Dalai Lama asked him to translate it. That could be. It's titled "Beautiful Adornment of Mount Meru." And I don't have the page numbers because I don't have the physical copy. I just have the electronic EPUB version. But I'm going to, if you do have the copy, it's in this section talking about the unique tenets. So I'd like to read this a little bit because he, as an adjunct to Thupten Jinpa's translation from Lama Tsong Khapa, here Lopez or Chandrakirti Dorje quotes Lama Tsong Khapa, and Lopez's translation is a little bit different in some places. Maybe becomes a little bit clearer. So this is available as a PDF on the chat. There you see about halfway down, beautiful adorn. Maybe if you're thinking you see more words there. So I'm going to read a little bit of this. Brief explanation of the primary assertions unique to this system. The primary unique mode, so this is the Tunmong Mayimba, the uncommon mode, in which Prasangika Madhyamaka comments upon the intention of the sutras and Arya Nagarjuna's and Arya Nagarjuna is twofold. That there is not even a particle that is established by its own characteristics. There's not even an atom or a particle of anything existing inherently. And that all actions and agents are permissible by positing them as mere nominal designations without even a portion of them being lost. So that's one of the unique qualities of this Prasangika presentation, that everything is empty of inherent existence, yet that doesn't mean, as a lower tenets would see, tend to see, that things become difficult, because they would like, the lower tenets would like to see that phenomena are either truly existent or inherently existent. So he continues, based on that, among so those two special qualities of the Prasangika Madhyamaka, based on that, among the many pure tenets that are unshared with other commentators, I think the word unshared is also this word uncommon to, right? And Paul, I don't know if you have the text there, if it's, he uses.
I'm just pulling it up, sorry.
It is renowned among our Geluk scholars that the primary ones, the primary tenets that are uncommon to others that are unique to the Prasangika, are explained as having been summarized in 8 difficult points. That is explained by the foremost omniscient one. This is one of the flowery ways that one refers to Lama Tsong Khapa, the foremost omniscient one, in his elucidation of the intention. That's Gompa Rapsa. The explanation of the supplement to the middle way. So now he's quoting this section that we've already read in the previous class from Thupten Jinpa's translation. So Thupten Jinpa's translation says, based on this approach, many perfect tenets emerge that are unique, compared to other commentators. What are these tenets? For now, here are the principal ones. So starting there, this is Don Lopez's translation. Based on that, among the many pure tenets that are unshared, there are many pure tenets that are unshared with other commentators. So this is Lopez's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa. What are those? If the primary ones are explained, first there are 3 refutations. 1, the unique way of refuting the foundation consciousness, alaya vijnana. The unique way of refuting that, the foundation consciousness, is a different entity from the 6 collections of consciousness. We mentioned that last time. The unique ways of refuting reflexive awareness, which means self-knowing, Rangrik. And 3, not asserting that knowledge of suchness, just as it is produced in the mind of the opponent through autonomous syllogisms. So Thupten Jinpa's translation was rejecting a foundation consciousness. Here he says the unique way of refuting. So the Tibetan word here is generally always the same phrase, ke malempa. So kelen means to accept or to assert. It can mean sort of like the passive, I accept. It can mean also to assert something. Ke milempa can mean to not accept or not assert. It can also mean to refute. This is sort of like more dynamic word, right? So they're both using here at the beginning, rejecting or refuting that foundation consciousness is separate from the other 6 collections of consciousness. Jinpa says a unique way of refuting, also, so he uses the word refuting now in the second sentence, but it's the same Tibetan. You could say rejecting reflective awareness, self-cognition. And then 3, rejecting the use of autonomous syllogisms, whereas in Lopez's text, he says, not asserting. So that's the same word, ke milempa, which can mean rejecting, not asserting that knowledge of suchness, just as it is produced in the mind of an opponent through autonomous syllogisms. So those are 3 on the, let's say, the ke milempa side. So there's the ke lempa side where you accept things. There are 5 more, right? Because there are 8 difficult points here. To read Lopez's, then there are, he says, then there is, maybe you should say, then there are, for the need to accept external objects in the way that consciousness is accepted. So you have to accept that. Jinpa says, accepting external reality's existence to the same extent as one accepts the existence of consciousness. 5th, in Lopez's translation, the tenet, the philosophical position that Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas realize that things lack intrinsic nature. 6th, the positing of the apprehension of the self of phenomena as an affliction. Jinpa translates that way as accepting that grasping at the self-existence of phenomena is a form of affliction. And then 7th, the tenet, then 7th, the tenet that destruction is an impermanent thing, or as Jinpa says, accepting that the disintegration of things is a conditioned thing, is conditioned phenomena, is a ngopo, functioning thing. And then 8th, the unique way to posit the 3 times because of that, and so on. Okay, so that we've heard the lists a couple of times. So without looking at your text, who can number them off? Yeah, Paul, can you do? What are the, no, yeah, okay. Yeah. Who's got good memory? Luis? Oh, yeah, we've heard a couple of times. You've read, you've prepared, okay. I'm a little bit teasing you. Jeremy, can you make an attempt? Can you duplicate? What are these 8? One way to start with is to think, first there's 3 things that are rejected, and then there are 5 things that are accepted. So that can help a little bit. Can you
No, sorry, not without reading them.
okay.
You can do
Don,
the first.
what's the first?
No foundation consciousness. Rejection of a foundational alaya
Yeah, right,
vijnana.
right, okay. Nadine, can you go on from there? What else is
Second
rejected?
is no self-recognizing awareness, no self, how is it called?
Right. So you could call self-cognition, or
Self-cognition.
these authors translated as reflexive awareness, Rangrick, right? And then the third,
Syllogism. Oh, refuting with the syllogism, or not using autonomous syllogisms.
right. So the Prasangika says that first of all, they say there's really no such thing as autonomous syllogisms, right? Autonomous syllogisms would be ones which the elements of it are established as inherently existent. So you could even just point it that way, or to say that as what's his name? Lopez has translated it here, not asserting that knowledge of suchness, just as it is, the actual ultimate reality, not accepting or asserting that it is produced in the mind of an opponent through autonomous syllogisms. Okay, so those are 3 things that are rejected. What are the 5 that are accepted? Anyone memory?
Well, there is a reality, there is phenomenon outside of our mind. There is a reality there.
We accept, unlike the Chittamatra, that there is an external reality separate from our mind. Okay, that's one of the 5 remaining ones. And then there are 2 that are kind of related. Nadine, yeah.
It's disintegratedness and something about the 3 times.
Okay, they come at the end, right?
Yeah.
There's more, yeah. And then the two others are that the Prasangika accepts or asserts that the hearers and solitary realizer arhats necessarily realize emptiness in order to achieve their their final goal. They don't necessarily have to realize it before then, but in the general Hinayana tenets, it's not talking about, it doesn't mention so much about the emptiness of phenomena. And then the last one is that, related to that, is that the Prasangika accepts that grasping to true existence, grasping to inherent existence, is an affliction. It's not an obstruction to omniscience, as some of the lower tenets present. Okay, make sense? You okay? Okay, let me read a little bit further from this PDF that you have. Based on that, and deriving from the quote unquote and so on, so that means here it says there were 8 unique tenets. At the end of that list, it said and so on and so forth. So in other words, there are many other uncommon tenets of the Prasangika that Other commentators have, in fact, Lama Tsongkhapa has even mentioned a couple of others that could be considered to be unique to the Prasangika. Okay, so he says, based on that and deriving from the, and so on, there are also many differences based on the circumstances of the path and of the fruition. The path and, usually we talk about three things, the basis, the path, and the result. When we talk about in various ways of dividing up subjects. So that these eight can be divided up into those three categories. Some say that it is some. So this is what I wanted you to think about. This is Jankya Ropa Dorji saying. So this is not quoting Lama Tsongkhapa any longer. Some say that it is not correct that the refutation of foundation consciousness existing as a different nature of the six collections of consciousness. It's not correct that that's a unique tenet of the Prasangika. Why? Because the Sautrantika Svatantrika also refutes that. Right? The Chittamatra accepts that foundation consciousness is separate from the six, the general six consciousnesses. I don't have six fingers. I have, usually those are the six consciousnesses. So they add two more, the foundation consciousness and the defiled consciousness. And but higher than the Chittamatra in the Madhyamaka, the Sautrantika Svatantrika refute that. So someone says, so it's not true that that's a unique tenet of the Prasangika. Similar points apply to other schools. It is also said that it is not correct, so that Lama Tsongkhapa is wrong, that the assertion that the destruction shikpa, this one that we variously translated as, how did Jimpa translate it? Disintegration, destruction. It is not correct that the assertion that the destruction is an impermanent thing is unique to the Prasangika, because the Vaibhashika also assert that. I'm not exactly sure where that comment comes from. I don't know. Paul, have you have any idea what Vaibhashika saying?
Yeah, disintegratedness is a thing. I do remember that, but I assume it's in the Abhidharma Kosha somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't recognize it. But anyway, this is so different people are saying these things, that Lama Tsongkhapa is wrong to say that these are unique tenets of the Prasangika. The person who said that is pretending to refute what Tsongkhapa's elucidation literally says. Elucidation means illumination of the intention, or Gomparapsa, right? This person is pretending to refute what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying. A follower of our foremost one, Tsongkhapa, fearing being undermined by those reasonings, took it upon himself with good intentions to add many additional words to what the elucidation literally says. So he's saying that there were some defenders of Lama Tsongkhapa who added some extra words which were not necessary and beclouded the situation. Both clearly display the demeanor of someone who does not know even how to read the great texts, which is unlike this class, because you know how to read the great texts, right? With a discerning mind. Because in the way they are refuted in Tsongkhapa's illumination, the phrases unique way of refuting, uncommon way of refuting. So that means it's not saying that others can't refute these in various ways, like the existence of external objects and so forth. But the Prasangika has a unique way of refuting them. So that's very important to keep in mind here. Most of the uniqueness comes about because of the Prasangika position that phenomena are not inherently existing. Okay. The phrases unique way of refuting and unique way of positing are clarifications at the end of the list in Lama Tsongkhapa's. It appears that these people who are arguing that Lama Tsongkhapa was wrong, it appears that they did not understand at all what must be eliminated and included by those statements. That those in such a state take on the burden of explaining, debating, and composing works on the scriptures is a sign of the ever greater decline of the precious teachings and is only a state of despair for the supreme discriminating ones. So even at the time of Tsongkhapa Dorje, people were just despairing the degeneration of the time. Now we're, many, many hundreds of years later. So he said, I will now briefly explain some of the primary ones among those unique features. There are three outlines in his text. The explanation of the 8 primary features, these 8 that we just talked about, how they refute own characteristic, that is how they refute inherent existence, and based on that, how they distinguish definitive and provisional sutras. So if you have a chance to read Lopez's translation of that, Adornment of Mount Meru, it's come out in, I don't have the physical volume. I'll have to get the physical for other reasons, but it's kind of the same series. This is the Gompa Rapsal text, right? So it's a similar kind of text like this. And there's also, you can also get it as an electronic publication. So I would recommend that very highly to read along with this section. And we will go back to it a little later in this class today.
Venerable George?
Yeah.
There's also Dan Kozort's book, The Unique Tenets in the Middle Way Consequence School.
Right.
I think.
And I meant to bring it up here, right? So that's one that we'll be calling on. And in Kozart's book is quite big and incredibly useful. He goes over all of the lists of these uncommon, unique tenets that different Gelugpa Lamas following Lama Tsongkhapa, where Lama Tsongkhapa said, and so forth. They added other things, especially Jamyang Shepa had a list of many different unique tenets and so forth. So that's also very good. I just thought that the translation by Don Lopez here in his presentation was very, very clear. And Tsongkhapa Dorje is following Lama Tsongkhapa's illumination of the intent. You may remember there's a PDF. I don't know if Snehi, did you get the PDFs from the previous classes? Have you seen them yet? Okay. So there's one by David Seforth Ruig, where he translates the 8 difficult points, where the last 2 are different than this list. So that's explained in Kozart's book, whereas Kozart in that book that Paul just mentioned doesn't seem to talk about Lama Tsongkhapa's original list in Gompa Rapsal that we're studying right now. So they're all kind of supplementary to one another. So right after that list of 8 is where we're beginning today. So it says in Gompa Rapsal, in Thupten Jinpa's translation, of these 8 unique tenets, the first is presented in the present section of the root text. So where was that? Did the root text come yet? The root text for that? I think it's a couple of pages beyond that, verse 639 in Jinpa's translation, since actions do not cease in an intrinsic manner, they are not inherently destroyed or ceased. Because of that, they remain potent even in the absence of a foundation consciousness. So I think this is what he's referring to there. This is the first verse that's beginning to talk about these 8 in the root text. Indeed, in some cases, the acts themselves may have long ceased, yet their effects will come about without fail. This you should know. Okay. So yeah, that's in the section about the meaning of the root text. So that's coming up. So of these, the first is presented in the present section of the root text. So that's what he's referring to. How rejecting reflective awareness or self-knowing is related to the non-acceptance of intrinsic existence will be explained later. So this can follow on to Jankya Ropa Dorje's criticism of people that didn't realize that these unique tenets all depend on some particular prasangika tenets, such as the non-existence of inherent existence. So he said, how rejecting reflective awareness is related to the non-acceptance or the rejection of inherent existence will be explained later. So that's coming up in the text later. Don't have to worry. So that there's big refutation of self-knowing. Then Lama Tsongkhapa says, I have already explained extensively elsewhere how disavowing, maybe that's the same Kemelemba, autonomous syllogism is related to the rejection of intrinsic existence. So he has a note 519 there. What does that say? 519 says, this alludes to Lama Tsongkhapa's own discussion in works such as the special insight section of his great treatise on the stages of the path, so the Lanrim Chemo, and in his section in the essence of true eloquence. So if I recall, I did prepare PDFs of those. I think you have those sections that you can go back and read when we get to that, because that will be, he's not going to explain that so much now. About the rejection of autonomous syllogisms, because he's talked about that in other texts, in the Lanrim Chemo and in the Lekshe Ningpo, Drungne Lekshe Ningpo. Okay, so those would be good to refresh your mind about those presentations. And a brief explanation will be presented here as well. So it's not that when we get that brief explanation, we can go back to those PDFs. How acceptance of external reality also derives from such rejection will be explained later. Again, so that's coming later. So the main thing that's being rejected right now is alaya vijnana, that the Chittamatra says. Then he's continuing, how the fifth tenet is due to this rejection of intrinsic existence is as follows. So what's the fifth tenet? Where there were three rejections and the external reality, then how the Prasangika says that the hearers and solitary realizers necessarily realize emptiness. So when we studied that earlier, does anyone remember, this was maybe before the first Bhumi, maybe in the introduction sections of the Gompa Rapsa, but we had classes about this. And maybe it was one of the Bhumis, I can't remember, but it was a whole section on the fact that the Prasangika says that hearers and solitary realizers necessarily realize emptiness. Chandrakirti says this explicitly. Buddhapalita says this explicitly. And Nagarjuna also implies this, that the hearers and solitary realizers necessarily realize fully qualified emptiness of inherent existence. So here it says, how the fifth tenet is also due to the rejection of intrinsic existence is as follows. So now he's going in more detail. In the same book where he talked about it earlier, mainly through, I think, sort of scriptural citation, now he's going to go into the kind of the proof of it. Just as Buddhapalita defines self-existence that is negated in the Shravaka scriptures. Remember when we talked about the Shravaka scriptures, there were some quotations that form is like a mass of foam. Remember? So that's what this is referring to. Just as Buddhapalita defines the self-existence that is negated in the Shravaka scriptures, such as the statement, all phenomena are devoid of self-existence, Buddhapalita describes that, defines that to be the existence by virtue of an essence, by virtue of some kind of inherent existence. When the Shravaka scriptures say all phenomena are devoid of self-existence. So the general interpretation of those Shravaka scriptures, Pali Canon scriptures, even by modern translators like Bhikkhu Bodhi and others, they all say, this is not talking about what Madhyamika is talking about. This is talking about something more, more essential. But Buddhapalita, Chandrakirti, Lama Tsong Khapa all say that this approach is accepted here as well. That the Shravaka system does imply in certain sections that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, and that the sharp practitioners, I just got to pop up here, confirm your speaking language. I'm not sure why on Zoom.
That's probably because it's doing automatic transcription and it thinks you're not speaking English.
Oh, yeah, okay. It thinks I'm speaking.
Maybe it thinks you're speaking Tibetan.
I am sometimes. Okay, so the point is that not all of the Shravakas or Pratika Buddhas who followed the scriptures are going to encounter this. They will be for the most part, mainstream practitioners who just take that phenomena that the self is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, and they would assume that will lead them to nirvana. But for Prasangika, that will not lead them to nirvana. They won't be able to eliminate all of the afflictions that way, although they can suppress certain of the afflictions with that realization. So it has to be that in the Hinayana scriptures that there is some intimation, statement that can be understood by the sharper practitioners, that they can go forward to realize that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. The sense here is that of a comprehensive understanding of selflessness. The meaning of a comprehensive understanding of the selflessness of persons is to be understood as the absence of a person existing by virtue of its own essence. So here it says, ngongi drupa. So when he says by means of its own essence, he's saying ngongi. Paul, what do we usually translate? So this is related to a question that one of you were asking just before class about the meaning of entity. I think it was KT maybe was asking, right? So how do you translate ngongi drupa?
Well, I think isn't it ranking drupa here?
Is it here? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean by way of its own entity, by way of its own essence, something like that. Yeah. By way of its own. So it would be that Kangzak ranking drupa meba, right? That there is no establishment by way of its own entity of a person. Persons are devoid of establishment by way of their own entity, something like that.
So these are words that are again congruent with what we usually would like to say, just in a very simplified way, that the real meaning of the selflessness of person is that the person is not established, is not existent inherently, does not exist inherently. Here by way of its own essence, you could say by way of its own entity. The point is that realizing such selflessness of persons correctly requires correctly realizing the selflessness of phenomena as well. So in order to realize the selflessness of persons from the Prajnanika point of view, you have to also understand the selflessness of phenomena. Unlike lower tenets that say that you can correctly understand the selflessness of persons, that the person lacks this, is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent person. That's what the Prajnanika would say is a gross selflessness of persons. You can realize that without realizing the emptiness of phenomena. Prajnatika says that's not possible. If you realize the selflessness of persons, you will necessarily be able to realize the selflessness of phenomena. Following? Snehi, how are you doing? Are we following?
More or less, less more than more.
Less more than more. So Doris is saying she understands, I think. That's her sign language. How are we following? Karen, making sense? So we've gone over this before in the earlier sections that in the Hinayana scriptures, there are these statements that even the present commentators, like I say, Bhikkhu Bodhi and other translators, say don't believe what the Madhyamikas are saying. This is something else. But Nagarjuna, I think Nagarjuna also quotes this. I'm not sure, but certainly Buddhapalita, Chandrakirti, and others quote these from the Shravaka scriptures, the Hinayana scriptures. And the implication is that they're talking about leading the Hinayana disciples into this deeper understanding of emptiness. Okay, so let's continue. So given this, based on this, one must definitively or definitely admit grasping at the self-existence of phenomena to be a form of affliction. Remember, there were these two tenets. One was that the hearers and solitary realizers necessarily realize emptiness of inherent existence, and that, go on. Someone was going to say something. And the second one that's related with that is that grasping to inherent existence or to true existence, if you want, is an affliction. Whereas the lower tenets say that it's not necessarily affliction. Why is that? Why is it that they say it's not an affliction? Do you know, David? The lower tenets? They would say that grasping to the selfless, the self of person as being self-supporting, substantially existent, that is a klesha. That is an affliction. Why is grasping to, for them, the lower tenets, why is grasping to inherent existence not a klesha? Affliction. Oh, I see a lot of quizzical looks.
Could you repeat would you repeat the question again, please?
Yeah.
They say that the grasping at the self-sufficient, substantial existent person is a klesha, is a mental affliction.
Right.
However, grasping at
inherent existence of the person.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Is not an affliction. Lower tenets would say. Because they say that you can achieve nirvana by eliminating the afflictions, right? What is nirvana? What is arhatship? It's a state in which all of the afflictions have been abandoned. So if something is an affliction, it has to be abandoned. So they say that grasping to inherent existence is not an affliction in various degrees. Some don't even contemplate that that's something to be rejected. How are we following? Is it making sense?
Venerable George,
Yeah.
is that because the lower schools believe in the self-existence of phenomena? Like they posit, in partless particles and partless moments of consciousness.
Right. So there are various degrees. So the Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas, they definitely believe that phenomena are truly existent. So here, the truly existent is what Prasangika would say is the same as inherent existence, but just say they say that they are proponents of true existence. Then in the Mahayana, when the special quality is that there is an emptiness of phenomena. So the lower tenets say there's no emptiness of phenomena. That phenomena do exist the way that they appear, right? So the Chittamatra is of the Mahayana and says that there is something called emptiness of phenomena, but their definition of emptiness of phenomena is that the apprehending consciousness and the object apprehended both arise from the same seed, analaya vijnana, right? So there is an emptiness of form and form realizing consciousness being different entities. That's not what the Madhyamaka says. So that's the Chittamatra of the Mahayana. Then in the Madhyamaka, the Svatantrikas are more with what you're saying, Snehi. They're saying that there is an emptiness of true existence. They don't say there's an emptiness of inherent existence. They say inherent existence does exist, so there's no emptiness of that. They say there's an emptiness of true existence, and that doesn't have to be realized in order to achieve nirvana. So there's various gradations according to the various tenets. Did that help a little, Snehi? You're still thinking about that. Yeah, okay. Okay. I thought someone was raising their hand, but I was seeing my own hand going up. Okay. Louise is reminding me about a break, but we'll take that in a little while. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. Given that one must definitely admit that grasping the self-existence of phenomena to be a form of affliction, because in order to achieve arhatship, you have to get rid of it. This in turn gives rise to numerous distinctions between this Prasangika system and that of the Svatantrika Madhyamaka. Different kinds of distinctions, such as two different ways of defining the afflictions. So the Svatantrika, how did the Svatantrika define afflictions? That, well, everyone would agree, the afflictions are that which prevent you from achieving liberation, right? But then, according to your tenet system, you have to define what that means. According to the Svatantrika, grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person, and also anger that arises from that grasping, attachment that arises from that, ignorance that arises from that, pride, jealousy, all of these are afflictions that have to be abandoned. But Prasangika says there are subtler versions of all of those afflictions, anger, attachment, so forth, that are based on our grasping to inherent existence. Does that make sense? There are different levels of subtlety of the afflictions. Some of the afflictions are more gross because they're based on grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person. If you try to abandon those through meditation, you can suppress those, but you can't necessarily abandon those until you've realized the emptiness of inherent existence. Okay, let me continue. So this in turn gives rise to numerous distinctions, such as between this system and that of the Svatantrika Madhyamaka. such as two different ways of defining the afflictions, we just talked about, one subtler and the other coarser. So the coarser would be the lower tenets. Two different opinions on the question of whether the path of the 16 characteristics of the Four Noble Truths, such as impermanence, can lead to freedom. Okay, what is that talking about? Where did the 16 aspects come in here? Huh? Who knows? What did Anna, do you know?
Venerable, could you re-ask that question, please?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I can re-ask it again to use Shanka's, is it to re-ask again? Isn't that redundant? I don't know. Anyway, two different
Not
opinions.
if you have to ask multiple times.
Right. I'm just joking. Two different opinions on the, so Anna, there are two different opinions between the Svatantrika and the Prasangika. They're both Madhyamaka, right? Two different opinions on the question of whether the path of the 16 characteristics, that's referring to the Four Noble Truths. Each of the Four Noble Truths has 4 characteristics, right? So 4, 4, 4, 4 makes 16 characteristics of the Four Noble Truths, such as impermanence. So that's the very first of the characteristics of the truth of suffering, right? Suffering is impermanent, is suffering, and so forth and so on. Two different opinions on the question of whether the path of the 16 characteristics of the Four Noble Truths, such as impermanence, can itself lead to freedom, to nirvana, to moksha. Moksha. That's the word in Tibetan, tarpa. So I've mentioned several times the great friend of Paul Hackett, Paul lived with him many years, to Geshe Tardo. So what does Tardo mean, Paul?
It's tar. So tar is liberation, and do is to wish for. So wishing for liberation.
Right, desiring liberation or desiring freedom. Here, Jimpa translates it as freedom or moksha. So what does that mean? What are the two different opinions here? Does anyone know? Between the Prasangika? Oh, Rachel's here also. I ask Rachel. What are the two different opinions between the Svatantra? For Prasangika, can the path of the 16 characteristics lead to moksha, lead to liberation? What do you think, Nadine?
I think we learned it before that they don't assert that. No.
So Prasangika does not assert that. So the lower tenets say that they say, what's the more, I think even in Bodhisattva Charyavatara, so what's the need to meditate on emptiness? You just have to meditate on the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. That's the classic presentation, how to achieve nirvana, right? So the Prasangika says no, the lower tenets say yes. Okay, so there's the difference of opinion there. And then different opinions on what specific stage of the path one begins to eliminate the obstructions to knowledge. So the obstructions to omniscience, however you like to call it, the shadib. So what are the different opinions on that? Jeremy, did you ever study that? Maybe not.
No, sorry, I don't know.
Okay, no. Rachel? What did the lower tenets, what does Prasangika say? When do you start to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience?
Sorry, Venerable George. Driving and my brain won't do both.
Oh, you're driving. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. No. Keep your eyes on the road. No problem. Okay. Louise knows.
On the pure grounds, that's when on the 7th, 8th, and not what is it? 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis.
Right.
Where
So
the sh-
Prasangika says that the shedib, the obstructions to omniscience, are not eliminated at all until you enter the 8th bhumi, the 9th bhumi, the 10th bhumi. So those 3 bhumis are called the pure bhumis. So one has already, at that point, one has already eliminated all of the obstructions to liberation. One has become liberated. What is it? A Mahayana Arhat, you could say, at that point on the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis. One is equivalent in understanding, in that particular characteristic to the Hinayana Arhats. One has abandoned, one has become an Arhat, one has reached nirvana, but so one has not eliminated all of the obstructions to omniscience. It's only then on the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, starting on the 8th and finishing on the end of the 10th bhumi, that one is eroding away, abandoning the obstructions to omniscience. Whereas the lower tenets have different ideas. So let's say the Hinayana, first of all, doesn't even talk about obstructions to omniscience, right? So I can't remember the Chittamatra position, but generally in Svatantrika, it says that you start to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience when? Does anyone know?
The start of the path of seeing, the first bodhisattva ground, I think. Isn't it, George?
Is it on the first bhumi, or is it start on the second bhumi?
Oh, maybe the second.
Yeah. So on the first bhumi, we'll check. My memory is not perfect, obviously. On the first bhumi, we are eliminating the intellectually formed afflictions, right? On the second bhumi up to the 10th bhumi, you're eliminating, from the Svatantrika point of view, well, let's say from the second onward, you're eliminating the innate afflictions. From the second onward, Prasangika would say that you've already eliminated them on the 8th bhumi, 8th, 9th, and 10th, you're free of them. But the Svatantrika says that you already are eliminating, you're abandoning the obstructions to omniscience on those early bhumis. So that's a big difference between the Svatantrika and the Prasangika. How are we doing? Making sense? Karen, you look like you're in concentration. You're watching your breathing.
I have a question, George.
Oh yes, Sean, I'm very sorry.
Well, when you were talking about the differences between, when it was talking about the 2 different ways of defining afflictions of the Svatantrika, I thought you said one, I may have misunderstood you, but I thought you said the second one was abandoning inherent existence. Was that, what, did I mishear you?
Say that again.
Abandoning inherent existence.
No, this whole sentence.
Well, the passage where it said, this in turn gives rise to numerous distinctions between this system and that of Svatantrika Madhyamaka, such as the 2 different ways of defining the afflictions, one subtler and the coarser.
Right.
And you were talking about one being like the substantially, I can never remember the 3.
Right. So the lower tenets would say that the afflictions, this is the Sanskrit word klesha. Tibetans say nyonmong, right? What we call, sometimes we call delusions, afflictions, and so forth. So that includes the grasping, for the lower tenets, that includes the grasping to the person as being self-supporting, substantially existent.
Okay.
And all of the delusions that arise from that grasping, like anger, attachment, and so forth. Prasangika would say, even if you've reduced, subdued the grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person,
You still need to abandon
there's still a subtler grasping that's there that causes you could say subtler versions of attachment, anger, and so forth to be generated. So there is a difference on that level.
Okay, I just thought you were saying the Spatantrika were saying that you had to abandon inherent existence, and I was thinking that wasn't correct.
No, they don't say that you have to abandon inherent existence because they accept inherent existence in convention.
Okay.
Right.
So yeah, I misheard. Okay, thank you.
Good point. Okay, so then continuing in Jimba's translation, there's a question. Both Madhyamaka schools, that means Svatantrika and Prajnanika, accept that there are some who, having entered the Mahayana path first, establish well the view of suchness, but later fell, okay, you could say fall, into the Shravaka or Pratika path, Pratika Buddha path. In that case, one must accept that person would gain insight into such truth through meditation on the selflessness of phenomena in a direct manner, and he or she will have gained a deeper familiarity with what he has seen. Okay, what is this talking about? Who knows? Nadine, do you know what this is talking about?
Not sure, but it sounds like bodhisattvas who have realized the nature of reality, but then their motivation drops to the Hinayana.
Well, let's see. Yeah, it sounds like it. Both Madhyamika schools accept that there are some who have entered the Mahayana path first. Remember, like Shariputra supposedly had entered the Mahayana path first, but anyway, he didn't go up to the path of seeing, and established well the view of suchness. So what would that mean? Would that mean that they had to go up to the first bhumi to establish well the view of suchness? What do you think, Nadine?
No, because on the lower bhumis, one also establishes the view of suchness on its conceptually.
Right, on the path of preparation, and certainly on the sharp proto-bodhisattvas, even before you become a bodhisattva, those of sharp intellect can realize emptiness. They can establish well the view of suchness. It doesn't mean that they have a direct realization of it. They've established that well. So that there are some who've entered the Mahayana path, establish well the view of suchness, but later fall into the Shravaka or Pratika Buddha path. So I'm not sure if Shariputra was supposedly, when he entered the Mahayana path. Do you remember this anecdote, right, about Shariputra, what I'm talking about? Some of you do, some of you don't. So I'll just quickly remind him, Bodhisattva Charyavatara Shantideva alludes to Shariputra when he says, only the omniscient one can know how someone who has developed the mind of bodhicitta and given it up can eventually, ever experience anything good again. Like that. Once you've taken on the responsibility of benefiting sentient beings and then you give it up, how could you ever, rise in the path? So that's alluding to the situation of Shariputra when he had many, many lifetimes before, I don't know what they say, kalpas before, he actually had entered the Mahayana. Shariputra was one of the principal disciples of Buddha in the Hinayana, right? His Hinayana disciples, Shravaka disciples. So he had developed bodhicitta, and then a Mara asked him for his right hand. He needed the right hand for some ritual. So Shariputra with bodhicitta tried to, cut off that hand, although he was not yet without pain, right? He hadn't developed one of the bhumis. And he did that with great effort. And he gave that hand to the Mara with his left hand. So his right hand was gone. So he gave it, and the Mara said, I can't accept that. You're giving, how disrespectful. You're giving it to me with your left hand. In India, the left hand is the hand that you would wipe your underside with when you go to the toilet, right? So you never use that hand to offer to someone. If you use your left hand, you're holding your right hand. You give something. So at that point, Shariputra's mind went berserk, and he said, how can I work for sentient beings? It said, and he lost his bodhicitta. So he entered into the Shravaka path at that point. Nadine first.
Oh, Venerable George, can something like this happen to a practitioner in the bardo, and how to avoid that?
A practitioner who's entered the Mahayana path, could they lose their bodhicitta in the bardo?
Yes.
Interesting
What
question.
goes wrong?
I have no idea. I'll think about it. Shanka, Venerable, what are you thinking?
I forgot my question. It'll come to me, I'm sure.
Okay, good,
Sorry.
good. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Today I'm on a roll. I haven't forgotten anything that knock on wood. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about we're talking about someone who has entered the Mahayana path, understood emptiness well, established the view of emptiness well, but later fell into the Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha path. In that case, one must accept that he would gain insight into such truth through meditation on the selflessness of phenomena in a direct manner. Let's see, how did Venerable Joan translate that particular phrase there? She said, in that case, I'm going to get my other glasses here. In that case, it is also necessary to assert that such a person, through cultivating the selflessness of phenomena directly, perceives it and meditates on that already seen in this way. Okay, not clear yet what Lama Tsong was saying. In that case, one must accept that he would gain insight into such truth through meditation on the selflessness of phenomena in a direct manner, and they will have gained deeper familiarity with what has been seen. Okay, so they already established emptiness before they fell from the Mahayana. They hadn't realized it necessarily directly, but in the Hinayana, they will realize it directly and meditate on what has been seen. If so, Lama Tsongkhapa says, one must also admit that through such a path, that person will have eliminated, on the path of seeing, the acquired, intellectually formed levels of grasping at self-existence of phenomena, and that they will have eliminated on the path of meditation the innate self-grasping. Okay, so far, that's okay. This being so, the question becomes, within the standpoint of the Madhyamaka tradition, Svatantrika and Prasadika, that accepts things to exist through intrinsic characteristics. Oh, okay, so that's just limiting it to the Svatantrika. Should one accept two types of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena? One that belongs to the class of afflictions, and one that does not. Oh, thorny question. Do you have a Dharma question, or are you just reminding me, Louise, about taking a break?
I was also wondering, isn't that confusing wisdom and bodhicitta, that question? But I see now that they're going to something more specific.
Yeah, and I don't
But
think it's conflating bodhicitta and emptiness of realization. So I'll just quickly read a little of the reply, and then we'll take a break. Reply. No clear statements on this point appear in the Indian sources themselves. These Svatantrika Madhyamikas is varying between saying Madhyamikas and Madhyamikas. These Svatantrika Madhyamikas do have to maintain that such Shravakas or Pratika Buddhas may attain temporary elimination of the manifest levels of grasping to the existence of phenomena through their meditative cultivation of the path. So remember, the Svatantrika position is that to achieve liberation, say on the Hinayana path, using the Hinayana path, you don't have to realize emptiness of phenomena. You don't have to realize the non-inherent existence of phenomena. You just have to realize the person is empty of being self-supporting, substantially existent, right? But these bodhisattvas, someone who was a bodhisattva once established emptiness. They have realized emptiness to some degree. They fall to the Hinayana. Then when they meditate on emptiness, it says these Svatantrika Madhyamikas do have to maintain that such Shravakas or Pratika Buddhas may attain temporary elimination of the manifest levels of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena through their meditative cultivation of the path. Oh, does that make sense? Yeah, we're getting in the deep weeds here. Okay. This is not too bad. This is understandable. May attain temporary elimination of the manifest levels of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena. Oh, so what does that mean? A lot of words all linked together there. So generally, in the Hinayana path, this Svatantric would say you don't have to abandon or get rid of grasping at self-existence of phenomena, right? That's for the Svatantrika, that's a shadip, that's an obstruction to omniscience. But those who have already realized emptiness on the Mahayana path fall to the Hinayana. Here it says the Svatantrikas would have to accept that those Shravakas or Pratika Buddhas may attain a temporary elimination of the manifest levels of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena. Temporary elimination does not mean abandonment, right? It means that they are subdued. Nonetheless, without the complementary factor of the limitless collection of merit that the bodhisattvas accumulate through following the bodhisattva path, right? When we talk about collection of merit and collection of wisdom, that's what in our motivation, I'm stressing that very much for a long time. Nevertheless, without the complementary factor of the limitless collection of merit, it remains impossible to eliminate the seed of either of the two levels of grasping at self-existence. So what are those two levels? The intellectually formed, the acquired, and the innate. So such Madhyamikas would have to say that although some Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas may be able to temporarily eliminate the manifest levels. So temporarily eliminate, that means to subdue them through their meditation on emptiness. The Svatantrikas would have to say, but it's impossible to eliminate the seeds. It's impossible to actually abandon them. This is an answer to this qualm someone had, this question. In the view of our master, Chandrakirti, in contrast, So from the Prasangika point of view, grasping at the self-existence of phenomena belongs to the class of afflictive obscurations. So nyondip, the obstructions. So literally it means afflictive obstructions or obstructions that are afflictions, but it's also synonym with obstructions to liberation. So in contrast, grasping at the self-existence of phenomena belong to the class of obstructions to liberation, to afflictive obstructions. So to eliminate its seed, their seeds, does not require the complementary factor of the limitless collection of merit. Because for Prasangika, the Shravakas necessarily to become Shravakas, Pratika Buddhists, necessarily to become arhats, they have to realize the emptiness of phenomena. And that doesn't require this great collection of merit that the bodhisattvas collect. They can do it just through the Hinayana path. Such a complementary factor is only necessary, he maintains, Chandrakirti maintains, I guess, to purify the habitual propensities toward delusory dualistic perceptions, which belongs to the class of obstructions to knowledge. So it's only necessary to have this collection, the Bodhisattva's full collection of merit, their limitless collection of merit, in order to eliminate the particular kinds of obstructions to omniscience that bring about dualistic appearance, that phenomena appear to be inherently existent. Since gaining some understanding of these points just addressed seems to make a great deal of difference, I have discussed them here. Oh, since gaining some understanding of these points just addressed seems to make a great deal of difference. So yeah, it's supplementary. So think about that. We're going to take a little break. Get a cup of tea. Relieve yourself. I will take off my video, but I will listen then. Thank you. Good questions during the break. Paul, what did you make? Espresso? What are you drinking?
No, just a nice cup of Darjeeling, a nice cuppa.
A cup of. Okay. So let's leave that section for you to research about itself. We're going to go on to the next section now, explaining the meaning of the words in the root text. So this is earlier, it was referring to the refutation of the alaya vijnana was mentioned in the root text. So that's where we are right now. So this section begins, what then is the account from the standpoint that asserts no intrinsic existence for how the connection between karma and its effects is maintained without accepting foundation consciousness or the like? Because foundation consciousness is not the only, that's only the Chittamatra point of view, right? That the alaya vijnana exists generally. Maybe the Yogacara Svatantrika, some subsect also accepts that, I'm not sure. But there are other ideas of how there is a connection between creating an action and its eventual maturation. There's this big space in between them. Maybe eons ago, you gave some bread to a Pratyeka Buddha or to someone, a saint, and the result of that, will ripen maybe many eons in the future. So how do you connect those two? Generally, we say, as we mentioned before, generally we say in the Lan Rim general teachings that their imprint is implanted on the mental consciousness, and that mental consciousness continues, not the gross consciousness of this lifetime, but the continuity of that consciousness in future lifetimes. So here it's saying, for those that assert there's no inherent existence, how do you connect karma and its effect without accepting Alaya Vijnana and so forth. So there it begins. Now, all Buddhist schools, both higher and lower, so lower generally means Hinayana, higher means Mahayana, agree that even when a long period of time has elapsed between karma, between an action and its effects, from virtuous and non-virtuous karma will emerge effects in the form of happiness and suffering. So that generally we know that was one of the basic tenets. Which one of the tenets of karma is that talking about? What do you think, Nadine? What is that called?
Karma is definite.
Karma is definite. Yeah. So what does that mean? That means that from virtuous karma, eventually there will be a happy result, definitely. And what definitely means it doesn't mean it will definitely mature. It could be rotten. It could be destroyed by regret. Some virtuous karma you created, but when it does mature, it will definitely arise only as happiness. You won't get suffering out of virtuous karma, and out of negative karma, there will definitely be some suffering effect. So I've told you the story before, anecdote, when the Sangha, the Inji Sangha, was in Dharamsala many, many years ago. I don't know, 40 years ago or more. And we had our own living space. Finally, we'd found a place. And Serkon Sencha Rinpoche was giving teachings on, I think he was giving teachings on Vajrayogini that we were all attending. And all of the Sangha, almost all of the Sangha at that time, we had to get new visas in our passports to remain in India. I don't know how it is now, how long you can stay at any one time. So I volunteered to go to some other town where you could bring your visas, and the magistrate there would, if you passed some rupees to him, he would give you extension of your visas. And I remember it was kind of a big loss because I was going to be missing the teachings that Serkon Rinpoche was giving, right, on Vajrayogini. And I remember as I was leaving, Dr. Nick was yelling down the hill, "Don't forget, karma is definite." What did he mean? He said, don't feel bad. This virtuous karma, you're taking on this, giving up, listening to the teachings in order to get the visa renewals. I had all of these passports for all of the Sangha. So this would definitely emerge as something happy in the future. Maybe that was why I've had so many, chances to receive long discourses on Vajrayogini and have done 3-year retreat. I don't know. Could be. Karma is definite. Anyway, so now all the Buddhist schools, both higher and lower, agree that even though there's a long period, there will emerge these effects from virtuous and non-virtuous karma. That said, for the karmic act to remain present up to the point of immediately before issuing its effect, so the karmic act, the action that's done, when it's done, like we talked about before, giving is when the other person has received the gift and they know that you see some pleasure, that's the completion of the act. So that karma has finished. That karma is no longer existing, right? It's destroyed at that point. But yet there's going to be a result sometime in the future because of that. This said, for the karmic act to remain present up to the point of immediately before issuing an effect, it would have to be permanent. That's one way of looking at it. The karmic, what it is called, the karmic act. The action's not permanent, right? Actions are impermanent. Since something permanent cannot be causally efficient, something permanent can't give rise to an effect. It can't be causally efficient. Okay? Therefore, the causal relation that allows effects to originate from such an act would become impossible in that case. If, on the other hand, the karmic act were to disintegrate in the subsequent moment, that is, in the moment immediately following the execution of the act, if the karmic act were to disintegrate in the subsequent moment, this would mean that from that point on, up to the moment before the effect is issued, the karmic act would not be present. So if the karmic act were to disintegrate, rather than being permanent is completely out of the question. If it were to disintegrate, it wouldn't be present when the act was supposed to be, when I say the effect was supposed to be experienced. And yet the disintegration of a karmic act cannot be a conditioned thing. Well, that's not the Prasangika position. That's just assuming. Yet the disintegration of a karmic act cannot be a conditioned thing. So how then can effects arise from these karmic acts? So this is kind of like a qualm. It's assuming that the disintegration of an action means that it's no longer existing. You follow? Don, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I like your brief answers. Okay, good. No question. Snehi, what do you think?
I had a question, Venerable George. You know that last sentence? What does this mean? And yet the disintegration of a karmic act cannot be a conditioned thing.
That's a supposition of this qualm, meaning that disintegration from the person who's thinking about this thinks that if something is disintegrated, it's no longer existing. Therefore, it can't be a conditioned thing. It can't be a ngopo, a functioning thing. It can't have any function. It's just disintegrated.
Oh, I see. Okay,
So let's say
thank
when
you.
the vase is, so even though when we talk about cause and effect on the physical level, it's different than the cause and effect on the psychic level in the mind. We talk about karma and its effect, karma meaning action. You can also see analogy in the physical world. If you break a vase, you hit it with a baseball bat or something like that, it cracks into pieces. It's no longer a functioning as a vase. But we can go back to that later, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. So hold on, Venerable, let me go a little bit further. Okay, so to respond to this problem, yeah, how to connect the karma, so you've created karma, it's existing impermanently until it's completed. The action, you have the preparation, the execution of the action, the completion of the action, and so forth. When it's completed, that karma is no longer existing. You walk away, you've given the food to the person, or you've thrown a rock or you stepped on a bug or slapped a mosquito out of anger. You've killed it. Then after that, it's like that action is no longer existing. How can it give an effect in the future? That's the question. To respond to this problem of how the karmic act, which comes to cease in the second moment, that means in the moment, the first moment means when the action is, we say the act, that means the completion of the act. The next moment, it no longer is existing, right? You're no longer killing, it has been killed, whereas you're no longer giving, it has been given. How the karmic act, which comes to cease in the second moment, deposits its potential immediately prior to ceasing. There are various kinds of ways that the different Buddhist schools have explained this. One, some postulate a foundation consciousness, alaya vijnana, upon which the seeds are impressed. And that's the main emphasis here in this section, where Lama Tsongkhapa is, of course, following Chandrakirti. Chandrakirti is especially refuting the Chittamatra and Svatantrika systems, because they are Madhyamaka systems, right? I mean, they are Mahayana systems. Chittamatra is Mahayana, and the Svatantrika is Madhyamaka. So he's especially refuting them. Nagarjuna spent more time refuting the Hinayana tenets. So anyway, so some posit or postulate alaya vijnana. Others assert something called non-corrosion, resembling a guarantee or a promissory note in relation to a loan that belongs to the category of non-associated mental formations, non-associated mental, what do we call it? Non-associated, non-associated, what do we say? Forgotten.
Compositional factors.
Thank you. Compositional factors. So he translates it as non-associated mental formations, compositional factors, and is allegedly separate from either of these two karmic acts. So what are the two karmic acts that are being referred to here? I think we asked this question before. I think it means virtuous and non-virtuous acts. Okay, so some people, so in the certain Vaibhashikas, I guess, it'll come out who these are later, postulate something called non-wasting, or Chimpa translates non-corrosion as this factor. Some others, number 3, some others postulate what is known as obtainment, prapti. This is also translated as attainment, or many different ways. Something different in nature from the karmic act. So that's similar to this other non-wasting. That's different than the act itself, belonging to the class of non-associated compositional factors. So this almost sounds like non-wasting, but is a little bit different. 4, others postulate a mental continuum. He just has the Sanskrit of mental continuum there, chitta samantana, that has been imbued with the habitual propensities of the karmic acts. That's generally in the Lan Rim what we say, and that will be, there's a certain truth to that we'll see later. Thus, they all maintain that there is no contradiction for a karmic act that has ceased to bring forth its effects in a future long afterward. So in other words, generally what they're all saying is that something is created which is impermanent, whether it be a seed on the consciousness or something called non-wasting or attainment, which is a non-associated compositional factor, that continues to exist in the continuum or associated with the mental continuum until the time that it ripens. Venerable Shankar, what do you think?
I wanted to ask you again, I'm still not clear what it means here to be a karmic act in the first moment and second moment. Sorry.
So, yeah, when we're talking about the action finishing, so when the action is finished, the next moment, the action is no longer existing.
So when we say the action,
it has disintegrated, shikpa. Okay, then go on.
So the action here we're talking about is if I give money to a beggar, so that's the action we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The first moment I am giving that action, and the second moment, I'm doing
there might be many, many moments. You know, say the first moment, you're approaching, you're thinking of giving, you're taking it out of your pocket, you're putting it toward him with a smiling face, hopefully. and offering it to him with your right hand. And once that person has accepted it and it's no longer in your possession, that's called the completion of the act. So that's the karmic act. So that's the karma that has now disintegrated in the subsequent moment, or in the second moment after the karma existed the first moment because you had given it, and now when the action is completion, it is no longer existing.
That's the supposition, right?
Well, that's what also Prasangika accepts also, that the action is disintegrated. The action has disintegrated. So generally, most people would say disintegration means it has no kind of potency, no karmic efficacy after that. It's just gone. How could it give a result in the future? So they have various artifices to try to explain that. They say that when it is disintegrated, that creates non-wasting, or something called attainment that's imbued in the mind, both of them being impermanent. So they're existing, some kind of residue of that action is existing and is impermanent, so that can exist, in a continuum, or that a seed has been implanted in the mental continuum or in the alaya vijnana. All of these are ways to try to explain how once the action has disintegrated, that it can have an effect. So the Prasangika says it does disintegrate, but Prasangika says disintegration itself doesn't mean non-existence. Disintegration itself is a functioning thing. I'll tell you a secret. For Prasangika, right? Disintegration, or shikpa, or how did I can't remember how Jimpa translated disintegration. Did he call it? What was in that list of 8? Accepting the disintegration of things as a conditioned thing, as an impermanent phenomena. Okay. Okay. So then, they all maintain that there's no contradiction for a karmic act that has ceased to bring forth its effect in the future long afterward. Then Jimba's translation continues. Since the karmic act deposits its imprint upon the foundation consciousness, or this is assuming the first of those, that, let's address that first of all. Since the karmic act deposits its imprint on foundation consciousness, such imprinted potential is the effect of the karmic act. So the karmic act finished, and it immediately has an effect, rather than eons in the future when the final effect comes. Its an immediate effect is an imprint on the alaya vijnana. Okay? Since the karmic act deposits its imprint on the foundation consciousness, such imprinted potential is the effect of the karmic act, and it is through the continuity of successive series of such an imprint that eventually effects come into being. So that imprint on the alaya vijnana, some seed, some bija, is deposited, and it being impermanent, it keeps on going. It's not lost, and when the right conditions arise, it matures into the effect. This is how they say, Chittamatra says, effects of the initial karmic act come into being through a continuous series of effects. That makes sense, right? What do you think, Luis? Does that make sense to you? Luis? Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
About the foundation consciousness, how the imprints continue? Sure. From their point of view, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, so you say there is an effect immediately after the karma, and that effect is impermanent, And that effect, that karmic seed, eventually, when it matures, it gives the final result. So that explains that gap between the karma and the result. Okay. We should understand the other three positions along the same lines as well. So whether you call the creation of a non-associated compositional factor called non-wasting. So as soon as the karma is finished, non-wasting exists, and that continues to exist in the continuum until the right conditions arise, and then it gives its result. So that explains the gap. Or if it's called attainment, or if it's an imprint on the mental consciousness, the continuum of the mental consciousness. We all together? Making sense? Okay. So of these, the first is a standpoint of certain chittamatras. I'm not sure when he says certain chittamatras. I'm not sure if there's some chittamatras who don't accept that, but I think that's the general chittamatra position. As for the second, the non-wasting, Avalokitavatra.
Oh, Venerable George.
Yes.
Certain chittamatrans, I guess, would be chittamatrans following scripture, since chittamatrans following reasoning don't assert the seventh or eighth consciousness.
Oh, right. Thank you. So of the various Sautrantika schools and Chittamatra schools, the Vaibhashika schools, oftentimes they're divided into those following scripture and those following reasoning. So as the Chittamatras following reasoning don't accept the seventh and eighth consciousness, either of them, or?
Right. That's the Dignaga Dharmakirti chittamatrans following reasoning, as opposed to Vasubandhu and Asanga, those following scripture.
Thank you for clarifying that. Right. So that is, of these, the first is the standpoint of those chittamatras following scripture, right? As for the second, Avalokitavatra, I thought you were going to correct my pronunciation.
No, I can't. Avalokitavata, right? Yeah.
Avalokitavata, okay. It's to the Vaibhashika school. So there's a note there, 521, that says what? Commentary to the Lamp of Wisdom. So Avalokitavata wrote a commentary to the Lamp of Wisdom. And in that, he attributes this second view about non-wasting to the Vaibhashika school. However, it is a school other than the Kashmiri Vaibhashika. So the Kashmiri Vaibhashika don't assert non-wastage. The third, which is what we call attainment or prapti, or topa in Tibetan, the third is also a subdivision of the Vaibhashika school. So those two, the first is Chittamatra, following scripture. The second and third points about non-wastage and attainment are various Vaibhashika schools, so they're Hinayana schools. The fourth, although no explicit identification of it is found, this position looks like the view of the Sautrantika and the Kashmiri Vaibhashika. So the Vaibhashikas that were centered in Kashmir. So Kashmir is a place where you've heard it in the news now. That's where all of the violence is centered between the India and Pakistan. Pakistan for a long time trying to take control of Kashmir. India having control of most of it, so forth, and it's affecting the lives of some of the members of our class even. So as for the fourth, no explicit identification of it is found. The position looks like the view of the Sautrantikas and the Kashmiri Vaibhashika if one correlates it to the 9th chapter of Vasubandhu's commentary on the treasury of Abhidharma. So in the Abhidharma Kosha Bhasham, so what is it called? The Vasubandhu's auto commentary to his root verses, the Karikas. there's a separate book, actually, separate section on the 9th chapter that he's talking about the selflessness of phenomena, selflessness. So, however, so this is the general, from the Sautrantika point of view, that means that's the general kind of presentation we get in the long rim, right? That when an action is completed, it leaves a seed in our mental continuum. However, although it is true that the Kashmiri's Vaibhashika accept the notion of obtainment, topa, they do not assert that attainment is a product of the two karmic acts, the thing being obtained. What does that mean? However, although it is true that the Kashmiri Vaibhashika accept the notion of obtainment, they do not assert that attainment is a product of the two karmic acts. So that is, when the virtuous or non-virtuous, when we say the two karmic acts, I think that's what's being referred to. It's not a product of those. So it is something else when we're talking about the Kashmiri Vaibhashikas, and I can't remember from the Abhidharma Kosha what their argument is there, but I will check. They say it is not, they do not assert that attainment is a product of the two karmic acts. They say they refute that as a product of the two karmic acts. The thing being obtained, I don't understand that phrase in Jimpa's. Does anyone have an idea what that's referring to? How does Venerable Joan translate this? Paul, did you have an idea?
I thought it was talking about the thing that is different from the karmic act and belongs to the class of non-associated, the compositional factors.
Venerable Joan translated, regarding the third position, it's the one we're talking about, although the Kashmiris assert acquisition or obtainment, they do not assert that acquisition is produced by the two actions, comma, the phenomenon to be acquired. So, Paul, do you have an idea of this?
I mean, it's just, there's something weird with the grammar here.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on because I mean, it's just that phrase is just sitting there, tok je chu, the thing to be acquired, the phenomenon to be acquired.
Right.
And it's just sitting there, it seems grammatically unconnected to everything else. So
right.
I think that's why I think that's why they both translated it that way.
Okay, so in Don Lopez's translation of the adornment of Mount Meru, this tenets by Chandrakirti Dorje, he has the same section. Second, so we're talking about, yeah. So this is okay. I don't have so hopefully by next class or by Monday I'll see what how he translated this section. He gave some more commentary. Chandrakirti Dorje gave more commentary on this. So that's right at the moment that seems enigmatic when you're talking about the two karmic acts, the thing being obtained. Usually the karmic acts are not the thing being obtained. They are the two karmic acts are the things that bring about the obtainment. Maybe that's the grammar can be understood that way. Anyway, we'll try to clarify that. Here, the third position appears to refer to someone who does accept this. So although the Kashmiri Vaibhashikas accept the idea of attainment, that once once you have created an action and that action has ceased, upon its cessation or its destruction, there is obtainment. They just make some fine difference that it is not a product of the two karmic acts. Here, this third position appears to refer to someone who does accept that it is a product of the two acts. This is the significance of the phrase in the commentary, according to you. So what does that mean? That's note 523. It says Tsongkhapa is referring to the opening section, the opening sentence of this section of the commentary. That means Chandrakirti's commentary, where Chandrakirti asks, according to you, following the cessation of the karmic act, how does an effect come into being from the karmic act that has already ceased? Okay, so that was in the root verse, or that was in the commentary rather. Okay, so we'll just read this and then we'll finish. So this is 639 that I read earlier in the class. Since actions do not cease in an intrinsic manner, the cessation or the destruction of an action is not inherently existent. Remember when we talk about production? Production doesn't inherently exist. Also, destruction does not inherently exist. So interesting. Because of that, these actions remain potent even in the absence of a foundation consciousness. Their destruction, the destruction themselves, the cessation of the action, that shikpa in Tibetan, that is a functioning thing. Indeed, in some cases, the acts themselves may have long ceased, yet their effects will come about without fail. This you should know. So I'll just, for auspiciousness, just read this next paragraph. This is where we'll start next time. For the Prasangika Majjhimika, according to whom the karmic act did not arise of its own being, for the Prasangika, according to whom the karmic act did not arise, was not produced inherently, since karmic actions do not cease inherently, they do not cease in an intrinsic manner, there is no contradiction for the effect to originate from something that has not ceased inherently, has not ceased intrinsically. You following the words? Making sense? So even though one does not subscribe to a foundation consciousness, in its absence, one can maintain, well, even if you don't accept any of the other three solutions, you can say that in its absence, in their absence, in the absence of non-wastage or attainment or imprint on the mental consciousness, the karmic acts remain potent in bringing forth their effects, their results. Indeed, in some cases, the two karmic acts, virtuous and non-virtuous, committed themselves may have long ceased in the mental continuum of the sentient beings, such that many eons have passed, have elapsed, yet once committed, as soon as you created that action, their effects will come about without fail. That's the precept of karma called karma is definite. Well, the definite means that it will definitely bring about virtue or non-virtue, depending on whether it's the two karmic actions. This, that effects inviolably follow from their causes, is something you should know. This being so, the causal connection between karma and its effects remains entirely tenable according to this standpoint. Okay. Does that, just the words make sense?
The people listening with me said no, George.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
So
what that means, yeah. So what that means is that when an action has finished, it is, when we're trying to figure out something between the action finishing and the result coming about, that big gap, there are different solutions. Some seed is implanted, or there's obtainment or non-wastage or imprint on Eliovich. None of those are necessary. The very finishing of the action itself is a functioning thing.
Mm.
It continues. Where is it implanted, or where does it exist? Well, we'll see later. Usually we say on the mere eye. The mere, that doesn't sound very satisfying, right? It's on the mere eye. Where is the mere eye? Okay. Anyway, there's a lot to discuss about that. So this is a very important consequence of the Prajnankiku's presentation of non-inherent existence. There's no inherent production. Likewise, there's no inherent destruction. Don, what do you think?
Well, I have a question that maybe you can help me with. I often wonder when it says the right causes and conditions have to come up for karma to ripen. Can you comment about that for me a bit?
Right. So say, for instance, at the time of death, there are many karmic seeds on the consciousness of throwing karma. So not all karma is throwing karma, right? Some karma is experiencing karma, different kinds of karma. So at that point, what karma ripens and throws you into the next birth depends on the craving and grasping at that time that caused the karmic seed to accelerate to the next length of the 12 links called becoming. Becoming is an actual, what is becoming? Is becoming a karma or a delusion or what? What is becoming?
I'm not sure how that's being meant.
Craving and grasping are both afflictions, right?
I think isn't becoming it's the arising, right? I mean, it's the seed that finally sprouts, right?
It's karma that's ripened.
Right.
So, or right in the state of pregnancy, ready to give its result, becoming. So it's usually categorized as a karma when we talked about the 12 links in various situations before. It was some of the 12 links are afflictions, some of them are karma. Like, say, for instance, ignorance gives rise to karmic formation. So ignorance is an affliction, karmic formation is a karma, right?
I'm
So,
more curious about if I have the karmic seed to have anger,
right?
what conditions need to come up for that to ripen?
So if it's been on your consciousness and has been nurtured to the point where it's kind of like ready to go, right? Just needs some instigation, the right condition. Getting into an argument on the canasta table, the bridge table, or poker game, going to a nightclub and being pushed by the doorman, or something like that, that it's ready to give rise to anger, right? So there's
So something that could generally provoke the karmic seed.
yes, yeah, provoke, yeah, like a stick, yeah, poking at it. So other situations, like, say, for instance, you might have the karma to be drowned. So if you avoid the rivers and bathtubs and everything, you might avoid the ripening of that. But if you're walking on the side of a river with muddy banks and you start to slip, that can be the condition to bring about your death. You know, that the ripening of your untimely death, because death has various causes, right? It can be that your life force has exhausted, or some other karma to die sooner, you know, like being shot on the street, or being shot like the kids that are shot as bystanders on the streets in different cities in the United States. They didn't do anything. They were just happened to be there at that time. So that becomes a cooperative cause for that karma to ripen.
So the most powerful purification act, to say to avoid anger, for example, would be to not let anger arise. That would be the most powerful purification.
Yeah, so cooperative cause. So anger arises from various other causes. Say, for instance, remember when we talked about the Kadampa precept about antidotes to anger? Do you remember that? One of the things is inappropriate attention. You know, generally inappropriate attention is what causes these different conditions to arise. One thinking, you know, let's see, this is all the fault of the other person, right? That you've been hurt, and the doorman pushed you, or someone insulted you, and the anger that could be a cause of anger. One of the reasons for anger can rise is inappropriate attention, thinking it's all their fault, without realizing one's own involvement in this and so forth. Another is a lack of empathy, lack of compassion, thinking the other person is worthy of my retribution. You know, when I'm about to get angry, they deserve my anger. They needed that, my venting, right? Have you ever heard that? They needed that. So you can go back and look at that. I think we talked about that in various situations in the past. The Kadampa precepts, the sort of antidotes to anger. Nadine, do you have a final thing before we finish?
Thank you, Venerable George. I always think of this example when it's about disintegratedness. Then, for example, somebody does something which is unwholesome or non-virtuous, like stealing, and it looks like the action is finished, but that the action is not really finished shows when the police rings on the door.
Right, right. Yeah, good point. So when disintegration of the action here is this kind of this unique Prasangika precept is at first very problematic, but if you start to think of it in relationship to the vast effort that was gone into proving that there is no inherent production, the same arguments can be used into saying that there is no inherent destruction. Finally, Paul, you have a last comment before we finish?
Yes, I have this memory of Bill McGee telling me that Kensei Yeshe Tupten explained this point to him. And he didn't explain it in terms of the positive, but he said about the other three, the mistaken ones, are an example of performing ultimate analysis and attempting to find the karma.
Ah, yes, yes, very nice. So we can go, we'll go into more depth on this, and I can read a little bit from Don Lopez's book that goes into these points on Monday, and we'll continue next Saturday. So thanks for your good questions. Louise, you'd like to put up the medication prayers? We tried to set a motivation at the beginning. We've created some virtuous karma. Even just by the force of the Dharma that we're listening to. Even if we didn't have any other, just by the, the force of the object, we've created some virtues. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. Implicit here, thinking of it as a dedication due to these virtues. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And then the long life, the prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, together with your lineages, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and mother living beings. When it says exclusively, that means not working for his own welfare, not working for Lama Zopa's own welfare, but exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings, the Buddhist teachings, and for the welfare of mother sentient beings. You suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, by those truths, the fact that these are true, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And finally, for all our teachers, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means moved by mercy, spiritual friends, illuminating spiritual friends, please live long and stable lives. I make this request. Okay, thank you. I guess a couple of people had to go off with other things who went quite a bit over. Sorry. Look forward to seeing some of you diehards on Monday. Hopefully a couple of people more will be. We missed today Mikhail and Suvansh and Stephen, but hopefully they may be back later. So take care, read
Thank
ahead,
you.
think well.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you.